Welcome to another episode of the podcast that discusses all related issues for the older workers in the workplace and when job seeking or hiring. On this episode, we are joined by Valerie Holland, a communications strategist and professional writer and the founder of Valerie Holland Writes. Valerie works with clients to create content and copy that increases engagement and conversations with their audiences, whether that's internal or external communications. She currently lives in the Richmond, Virginia area, and while Valerie has specialised in content strategy for companies in the real estate and healthcare sectors, she has clients all over the US in many different industries. So, whether you're a startup and launching a new website which needs content from scratch, or you simply need someone to refresh your copy to increase your website's effectiveness with SEO and engagement, Valerie can help you strategize and develop the content. From blog posts, articles, case studies, white papers, web copy, to long sales ClickFunnels sites. We discuss the importance the older workers can bring to a working environment and the value their experience can bring to everyday situations. So Valerie, thank you so much for joining us today, all the way from Virginia, Richmond. I'm not really sure, I'm not very good at geography, but I'm not sure where in the States that is, but I know it's a long way away.
I'm about 2 hours south of Washington, D.C.
Well, that's wonderful. So you get up there to see the president occasionally.
Let's not go into that conversation.
Okay. Well, that's not what we're here to talk about. That's fine. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us. I think it's going to be a great topic in terms of listening to advice and what you have to say for some of the listeners. In terms of what we're going to be covering, there's a few things, obviously, which would be great to learn more about you, what you do, and how the advice that you can give can help people in the older workforce, if you like. So being part of the Age Diversity Network, we're trying to talk to people that can give good, solid advice to the older workers, how they integrate, what issues they're having in terms of either continuing to move up the career ladder or even seeking new work. They may have been out of work for a few years and are struggling because they don't fit the culture, they're too old, but can't prove they're too old, etc., etc. And we hear the same stories, unfortunately, for a lot of people. But given what you do and being a communications expert, hopefully, obviously, some of the advice will help. But before we start getting into that, and I'm sure we'll come across a few examples, how did you actually arrive at doing what you do now? It's always interesting to ask a guest. I think, is it something you planned to do? I think the younger generation these days, I find they have a good career path in mind. They may not always continue that, but they at least have something in mind. I think for me, I've gone this way, I've gone that way, but I wouldn't say that I've had a mapped out career path. And I've just sort of fallen into it and built upon my strengths. So it's interesting. So you're a communications expert. What would you say is something that sort of led you into that?
Well, what I did was I got a degree in finance, and I always thought that I would work on Wall Street or something. In fact, I was a stockbroker early on. And then I got an opportunity to work as a copy editor for the newspaper, and they brought me on and I started writing financial pieces that were on the front page and other pieces, and I loved it. And I've always been an avid reader and an avid writer, but I just got the bug. I became the first blogger. I did a health and fitness blog and all this stuff when I was working for them. And so over the years, I've had various jobs using my degree, right? But it's always led to communication. So I ran a cardiology practice. I was a manager of a cardiology practice. Well, that was huge in internal communications and external communications, right? Mm-hmm. So right now I'm a database administrator for a nonprofit. So much of what I do is all about communications. And so I just knew that what I was going to do had to include communications and writing. Because it just was something I just had so much fun with. Yeah. And so then over the years, I also started my own business, founded my own business, Valerie Holland Writes. as an avenue to also keep that communications at the forefront. So yeah, I thought I was going to work Wall Street, and I'm not, and I'm doing something else that I just really, really love.
No,
So
that's fantastic. I think with the communications bit, what I find interesting is there's different levels of communications, and you mentioned internal and external. Clearly, external, if it's marketing, branding, I don't know, publishing, new releases of products or software or whatever that may be, and you've got the internal communications, which I guess is sort of allowing employees to understand what's going on. And again, whether that's to do with products, whether it's to do with projects, whether it's to do with management or how a company's doing, what they're going to be doing. I think also communications for me is something, I don't know if it's something that you touch on, is that in terms of communicating internally, is if you're running a project, for instance, or running a department, that's part of the communications is when things don't always go to plan, it's being able to communicate that too and explain why things didn't happen the way they could have done. And that's certainly not for publication externally, but certainly in terms of, I think people will often think, well, communications, all that does is it tells a good message. Do you feel that that's a fair...
I think there's so much to it, because a lot of internal communications is getting employee engagement. You know, the studies show that happy employees increase the bottom line. I mean, there's a direct correlation.
Absolutely.
So internal communications helps build the culture. It helps engage employees. When you have transparency and they feel like they know what's going on, they feel that they're more part of things. And then of course, with interdepartmental, right? So you have all those interdepartmental communications that have to go on. Are we communicating well with other departments so we're not overlapping or we're not duplicating? There's so much on internal communications, just as there is with external communications.
Yeah.
For me, the thing that I love the most is, whether it's internal or external communications, is the engagement part.
Yeah.
That's the part that I absolutely love, because it all comes down to people. Even me working with database administration right now, each data point represents a human being. It's not just data, right? So it represents a family, a person. And when you lose sight of that in anything that you do, I think your success rate goes down. If you can keep the humanity at it, what it's all about, then whether it's with your employees or with your data or with your branding, all of that, it's much more successful.
I couldn't agree more. I've written personally a number of posts and articles regarding engagement. And I think for me, engagement isn't just about ticking a box, which we all talk about box ticking exercises in organizations for a host of different things. But if it's real true engagement, it's understanding what is it we need to be telling the employees, you know, what's going well, what's not going so well with them, with the organization, what we're doing, why we're trying to do it, and listening to them. So it's all very well engaging, but it's actually listening to what they have to say, because often, you know, employees will have a lot of valuable things to say, and if you've not got the right people with the right ears listening to what they're saying, then often again it can lead to disasters, and that leads on to many other topics which we're not going to talk about right now. But you've got toxic bosses and toxic working environments where that doesn't happen, and I'm a firm believer, and you're right, if you've got happy employees, you get so much more out of them because they feel valued, they feel part of what's going on. And again, it's one of those things, I think, where if you've got the older employees, again, they like to feel that they're being heard too, that not necessarily they know better, that would be wrong to say that, but they've been there, they've probably faced more types of situations than other people, and have dealt with them in different ways. Maybe some haven't been as successful as other ways that they've done it, but they've got the experience and they've learned from it and are able to part with that sort of experience. And again, it's always very difficult, because with any situation that might involve older workers, I will never make the statement that because they're older, they've been there, done more, they know best. It's not the case. But what is the case is they've probably come across different situations more often over their working life because they simply work more years.
Well, think about this. I mean, you and I were talking about my daughter who's a surgeon, right? So
Yeah.
she's 28 years old. When she goes in and encounters a crisis in the surgery room,
Yeah.
you better believe the surgeon who's 50 or 60 standing next to her is much more apt to be able to be successful in that surgery than her. Not taking away from her, right?
No,
But
of
that
course.
surgeon to the right has encountered, oh, I've had a patient who's died on the operating table. I know what to do in this instance. Or I've had a patient bleed out on the table and I know that I need to do this, right?
Yes, yes.
So any employee who is 50 plus, they've encountered situations which gives them, brain muscle memory on how to handle those circumstances. It's like a muscle memory, right? When you encounter it, you learn from it, there's a muscle memory there. And so I think that's a real value in the older employees is they, just like that 50-year-old, 60-year-old surgeon, they've encountered things that they've been able to learn from and can contribute so much to the success because of that.
Yeah, and I think if I sort of try to do an analogy on experience like you've just discussed, if we've all got, when you're older, we've got older kids, but they still don't hesitate if there's something they don't either quite understand or know how to work with, that they'll get on the phone or they'll come around and talk to you and say, look, I've got this situation, what do you think? Have you got any ideas? Have you got any advice? And my take on that is in the work environment, it's very easy to say this, but I do believe it. In the working environment, if you've got someone who's in their 20s or 30s and there's somebody older that they're working with, just pretend it's your mum or dad. How would you actually approach them? Would you be speaking to them the way you're speaking to them now? Would you actually garner advice from them like you would with your parents? You should do. I'm not saying that their advice would be correct, but just open up. And you said earlier about engaging. An age shouldn't come into engaging. It should just be everyone is equal in terms of their thoughts, their ideas, their input, and value. And some are going to be better at things than others. That's just human nature. There's some things that I think personally I'm very good at, but at the same time, there's things I know that I'm very bad at. And I won't even attempt to do those. I'll ask someone else to do them because it's just not my thing. So I think it's really, really good in terms of being able to sort of understand where the older worker with the experience can bring in the knowledge and experience that maybe the younger person hasn't had. And the example you've just given about surgery is a fantastic one. Absolutely. That can boil down to saving someone's life even, because someone's been there before and they say, I know exactly what to do. Don't panic.
Well, and I think during, we're in such a unique time right now. I don't know about in Britain, but here in the US, so much conversation is happening about diversity and inclusion, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet, I'm not hearing age discrimination or age diversity being included in any of that conversation.
No, exactly.
And I find that very interesting because it all comes down to, looking at humans as humans. What do they have to contribute? So it doesn't matter if they're black or white, doesn't matter if it's a female or a male, doesn't matter if they are 30 years old or 50 years old or 60 years old. None of that should matter, right? What should matter is, how can this human being contribute to our organization?
Yeah.
And that's what matters, right? And so I think we're living in a really great time to bring up age diversity because we're already having the conversation about other types of diversity. So let's draw that in. Let's pull that in now, because it's the same issue of people not being valued for who they are instead of for an attribute that they have.
Yeah. And I think that's very, very true. I had a very similar conversation with somebody last week, same topic. It's if you look at all of the issues, and we've got it in the UK and it's worldwide anyway, I guess, diversity and inclusion, for me, you've touched on the points. It doesn't matter what ism you're talking about. The ageism bit doesn't really seem to be up there amongst it. It's everything else. And for me, if you look at diversity and inclusion, for me, it's quite simple. I'm not saying diversity shouldn't be there. Absolutely, it should. However, if you flipped it and said it's inclusion, diversity will come with that. So if you can include everyone and just completely disregard, what race they are, whether they're male, whether they're female, old, young, whatever. If everyone's included, diversity in a way sorts itself. Now that might seem a bit of a silly statement, but it does start with inclusion for me, because that then dispels everything that everyone goes on about. So just include everyone for what they are.
And I think even about, there's so many nuances, right? So I think about women with young children. When they try to get a job, here in the US, we've talked about that. You can't ask someone if they have children, right? No. But if someone knew that, say you had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, well, is that going to affect their hiring decision? Technically, it can't. By law, it can't. No. But they could be sitting there saying, well, this is a travel job. They're not really going to want to have to travel. They're going to have to leave their family, or they've got a homeschool, so it's not going to be as convenient. Those kind of things go on in the background all the time, I think. In so many ways. So I really appreciate you bringing up the age part of it, because I think that one's swept under the rug. I think that one, just isn't spotlighted at all. And yet how many people are 50 and over, either looking for a job or looking for a promotion or looking for a change. And I think it's way bigger than what is out there.
It is. And I think, again, it's starting the Age Diversity Network was specifically aimed at trying to tackle challenge to a degree, but more to bring people together and organizations to really understand the issues that are out there and to educate them. Because I think for all of the isms, which I've already said are out there, I think, yes, definitely ageism is one of them that's bottom of the pile. And it's easy to get around it for different reasons. But there are occasions where physically somebody may not be able to undertake a certain role, and that's fine. You can accept these very, very small instances where someone said to me, can I go and work in a warehouse, and by the way, every day you've got to lift 125 kilogram packs of beans to put them on pallets. I'd say, don't think I can do that. It's too much for me, and that's fine. You get that, but generally speaking, it's something that really is very difficult to prove, to get through, to get round, to get people to understand. And yes, we can talk about unconscious bias in the back of their head. They might look at someone and think, oh, they're a bit older than I thought they would be when they walk through the door. Their picture doesn't really sort of look like I was expecting them to be. And they're not going to fit the culture, because we've got a young, vibrant set of people here that mix and match and go out every Friday night and go and party, and not everyone wants to do that. There's lots of different reasons that they might think that they don't fit into the culture. However, if you look at the experience and the skill sets that these individuals have, the knowledge and the experiences that they previously had can be garnered to such an extent that other parts of the workforce can learn from them very, very easily and start to understand what it is these skills and experience can bring to the table. You've already mentioned an example in surgery, which is a great example, but there might be other things which are similar but not so dramatic, maybe, where something is failing in a manufacturing way, and somebody might say, well, actually, the company I worked with 15 years ago, we had the same problem. This is how we fix that. Exactly. Oh, great. As against trying to reinvent the wheel if you don't need to. Right. So I think in terms of how we change that, that we've got to move away from the box ticking exercise and get organizations to understand what it is they're missing out on, but also to say, hey, don't just tick a box, really engage and really take this seriously.
Yeah.
So part of what we're trying to do is to engage in such a way that we can educate, we can train, and we can help them implement the proper processes that should be in place to tackle ageism in the workplace. And I think it goes across all levels. It really does. It's not just the person who is looking to hire someone into their department. It goes through from somebody who's sifting through the CVs, somebody in the HR department.
Well, so
somebody.
right there, I was in my mind thinking, you and I had talked about applications, right? So
Yeah,
in the US, on an application, you can deny answering the questions, what's your gender, what's your race. They
yeah,
can ask it, but you have the opportunity to say you decline to answer,
mm,
okay?
mm,
But what many of them do about the age is they will make it where if you're filling out an online application, it won't accept it if you don't fill in certain fields, right? You have to fill
yeah,
in all the fields that they deem required.
yeah,
And so one of those is the year that you graduated from college. So if you graduate from college in 1980, well, then they can figure out how old you are.
yeah,
And so while you're able to deny the other questions about gender and race, they have a workaround where they can figure out your age, even if they're not asking it. And
yeah,
it would be lovely if that wasn't an option. Now, I get that they're probably doing that to verify who you are. Like, did you really graduate from this college in 1980? They're going to check.
sure, sure.
However, anything that can influence a company based on age, sex, gender, faith, whatever, shouldn't be allowed in there.
Yeah.
And yet this is still allowed. It's still allowed, these roundabout ways of determining a person's age.
Yeah, and I think we get we get exactly the same in the UK. If someone applies for a role and they go online, and whether it's filling out their online application or there's just a job description, you send the CV off. Often you'll get things like another topic will be someone must have a degree. And depending on your circumstances, people may not necessarily have gone to university. Certainly back in the 70s and 80s, in the UK at least, that wasn't necessarily something that everybody did unless you were pursuing a specific career in medicine, science or technology or something like that, and thought, okay, I know where I'm going to go. A lot of people simply went out to work, earn a crust, to start building their own little pot of money so they could buy a house. Or it may be that actually they come from an environment where mum and dad don't actually earn a lot, and it's their way of providing something to the weekly, monthly bills, etc. So people just went out to work. And if you've got 20, 30 years experience, you work through your career, and you can be top of your game, but still not have a degree. But these online applications say you've got to have a degree. So
Yeah.
I think it's I can't really call that ageism. However, I think it does work against the older worker, because if you don't have that degree, because you were brought up in that environment and you left school 30 years to 40 years ago even, and just went out to work, that is another way of sort of denying you the opportunity of being able to apply for certain roles. And I've had a lot of people who have said, I tick all these boxes plus a lot more that they have not asked for, but I can't apply because I don't have a degree. And it may not be I can't apply and send my CV off. It might be that the online software application system,
Right. It stops.
you press the button, do you have a degree? No. That's it. You can't go further. So
That's right. And I'll tell you what, that is the absolute aggravating thing about automated resume systems.
yeah,
I hate it because of
yeah,
that very reason. There are so many people that you are bypassing, not just older people. I mean, there
yeah,
are
of course.
so
Yeah,
many people who would be qualified and great employees, give 110%. They
yeah.
bring so much to the table, but they're getting messed over because you have an automated system that if they didn't check a certain box, they're gone.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I
Exactly.
understand for big companies especially, it streamlines their process, but it's very aggravating for the applicant.
It is, and I think that's the thing. It's sort of like, for me, I definitely think there should be a review. I understand why they do it, to sort of be fair to them.
Mhm.
The amount of applications they must get for each role, particularly more so now, maybe during the pandemic when people have lost their jobs. And it doesn't matter what age, they may have previously got, I don't know, 40, 50 CVs. Now they're probably getting 400 or 500. So in terms of trying to minimize the amount of CVs they get, they
Right.
have to have something. But
Criteria.
I don't necessarily support the you must have a degree bit, but then you start getting the other issue, which is what are the keywords that the ATS
Yeah.
system is trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Do I have all of those? Well, if I have all of those, my CV is going to read like a dictionary, and it's going to be about 20 pages long, and I don't want that. And they say don't do that. And so I think for me, it's really, there needs to be an overhaul and a rethink, because I suppose if they get somebody that can actually do the job, if it's a recruitment company that advertises that role, then providing they get their fee for doing it, and providing the company fills the role, tick box, success. But is it the right person? Hopefully it is. But more importantly, is it the best person? Have we
Right.
missed out on so many good people that we never even got to see?
Well, I'll tell you
Uh,
what, because your personnel is your greatest asset. Seriously, for any company, your greatest asset that you can own
yeah,
is your personnel, your employees.
yeah,
And not own, but you know what I mean? That
yeah, yeah,
they're your
yeah.
greatest asset. And if you don't hire well, it can go bad fast.
Yes.
It can take a few individuals who create strife, who cheat the company, who don't represent the company well, who turn away customers, whatever.
Mm.
I've seen entire departments go down the tube by one person.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that
yeah.
hiring is so important.
Mm, mm,
Um,
mm.
so it shouldn't just be about checking those boxes to filter and get people through, because you just may have left behind a really great employee. But again, what's the answer when you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applicants? I get it. I get why they have the ATS, but
Yeah, yeah, of course.
yeah.
Do you feel that because of the and this may not be an ageism question, but it certainly would have been had the pandemic not been around. But I suppose with the pandemic, it's probably across different generations now. But specifically, because people have found it difficult to either find employment, even if they're prepared to take roles, which a lot of people are, 2 or 3 levels below, just to be working, and are still
Mhm.
struggling. Do you think this is pushing more and more people into trying to start up their own business, because they feel that's the only thing I can now do, because nobody will hire me?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our human nature is we're survivors, right? We do
Yeah.
what we have to do to survive.
Mm.
If you can't get that job, you can't find the job, or you're way underemployed and your family still needs an extra $20,000 a year to make where you were
Yeah.
prior. Yeah, people get creative. People, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so thankfully, we live in a digital world where people have the opportunity to start businesses and actually do things
Mm, mm.
that aren't just in their locale, or where the opportunity is right there. So it opens up, but it's really hard. And
Yeah.
especially for someone who just tries to start something, you know, every startup, it takes years to get things
Mm.
under your belt
Of
and
course it
people
does.
sometimes they need the money now. They need the income now.
Yeah,
And
and that's the thing. Yeah, and I think also starting a business, people will often say, "Well, you don't need a lot to start a business," but actually, if you're starting a business, you've got all of these things that you need to be doing, because you need to be, to a degree, a master of all trades, and you're
right.
definitely not. And often, you may not be able to afford some of the trades that you need to master yourself at,
Mhm.
or get someone in to do. So it is a little bit of a difficult situation people find themselves in. Before I sort of just because we're going to have to wrap up soon. I've taken up a lot of your time already. But before we get into some of the stuff that you're doing, just one other question I'd like to ask you. In communication, obviously you're communicating things to other people for different reasons, whether it's internal or external. For any of the older job seekers out there, how could they use that type of skill to help themselves, do you think? Is there something that you could offer as a bit of
So
advice?
LinkedIn is the number one place I would tell an older person who's trying to, pivot or, um, move up, uh, whatever that is. So number one, get on LinkedIn and do it right.
Yeah.
Like, make sure you fill out everything, you put your picture, put a background up at the top. Don't just leave it a banner. If you need help with it, reach out for someone to help you. But make sure it's complete, make sure it's written well, have someone else read it with you.
Yeah.
Just don't stick something up there, like have other people put eyes on it. Even I used to be a copy editor. There were times I missed things. Having a
Yeah.
second set of eyes is helpful, right?
Mm.
So have someone be accountable with and have them, set up a LinkedIn profile, start networking. I mean, you met me, you were awesome. You reached out to me on LinkedIn and said,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like to have conversations with people that I connect with on LinkedIn. And we
Yeah.
had a conversation.
Yeah.
Start connecting with people, reach out. You can search for industries. So you can put communications in the search field and you'll see people who are in communications. So if there's a field that interests you, start making connections and start talking to people.
Yeah.
And then locally, you know, um, join a business group, or here we have network groups, or one of your interests. So maybe you're a photographer, is there a photography group in your area that you could join? Or if you're communications, there's a whole Slack channel that I found here that has a whole bunch of communications people on it,
Yeah.
local.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
networking, LinkedIn, and really start introducing yourself. And then one other tip someone gave me out in the career world, and she said, if there's something you're really interested in and you want to put your application in, find someone who carries some weight, right? So maybe, a doctor, like maybe you're applying for running a practice,
Yeah.
or a dental office or something.
Yeah.
Find a doctor who would send, they don't have to know the company that you're applying to, and they don't have to know the people there. Their SIG line alone is going to carry weight.
Yeah. Yeah.
So have them email your resume and cover letter directly to you, research and find out who the hiring person is. And then that person says, hey, I happen to know that you're hiring for this position, and I just thought I'd throw this person in the hat. I think it'd really help you to review their application. I think they'd be a great fit for you. Signed, Dr. Whoever,
Right, yeah, sure,
or whoever your top-notch person is that
Yeah,
could
yeah.
speak for you.
Yeah, that's good. That's
So,
good. So it's about what you're saying is about using contacts that you may already know, to say, hey, look, I want to be able to either get into this company or see what what positions they've got, etc. And using those people,
yeah.
using is probably the wrong word, because that sort of suggests that we're using people in such a way we shouldn't be. But it's not that. It's about having the personal contacts and utilizing that to your advantage,
Right.
which, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
That happens all the time. So no, good piece of advice. So in terms of what you do you work for, with the services that you're setting up? Are you working for organizations, or do you work with individuals, or both?
I actually work with both. Mostly
Okay.
they're businesses, but
Yeah.
two of the businesses that I currently am working with, they are sole proprietors. So
Okay.
they're individuals,
Yeah.
but I've worked with companies as well. So it's B2B and B2C businesses.
Okay.
I love doing people who are doing startups and they're launching a website. So everything's from scratch, like
Okay.
your bio page and
Yeah.
it's so much fun, right? Because it's a blank slate and you just
Sure.
get to go at it. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
So
no, that's fantastic. Okay, so if people are interested in what you have to offer, which is communications, content, and as you say, you've got the technical background as well, so you can actually offer quite a lot of different services there to I say individuals, sole traders or companies. Then certainly they can reach out to you. And I think certainly the advice also that you've given for the older workers and your input and certainly the example you gave us about the surgeon, I think it's fantastic. I've not heard that one before, but it's a great example, really is, about how an older head can sometimes bring additional
a problem or a solution that you didn't think of because they already encountered it before.
Absolutely. So people could reach out to you anyway. So in terms of whether they want a new website, whether they want to put together some sort of communication strategy, if it's an outward bound externally for a smaller organization or a sole trader that wants help in terms of how do I get my messages out there, tell everyone what I'm doing, what we do, and internally equally so, you can help organizations with the internal communications. It's all fantastic stuff, and I think I'm really pleased that we had this chat. We've spoken before, but this is great for the podcast anyway, so it gives people a good understanding also, because they don't necessarily always realize what the titles that people have, what does that actually mean. So it's very good, I think, also to be able to get people to understand what that really does mean. What do you do? You know, what is a communications expert? And they might think that you're climbing up a pole putting some telephone wires together. Who knows? But I think it's great.
We just dated ourselves there. I don't think there is such a thing anymore, is there?
No, I don't know. But I think, no, that's fantastic. And thank you so much for coming on. If people are interested in reaching out to you for either some help, whether that be advice or whether you can actually help their organization or them in terms of what they need to be doing for their communication strategy, what's the best way that they can actually contact you?
They can go to my website, which is valeriehollandwrites.com.
Yep.
Or that my email is valeriehollandwrites@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Well, when this podcast is released, for anyone that is watching the video version, that will be up on the screen as well, so that'll make it easier. But if you're just listening, just to reiterate, to contact Valerie, it's valeriehollandwrites.com. And your email address, Valerie, can you just repeat that one again?
valeriehollandwrites@gmail.com.
Fantastic. So we can't get the first bit wrong. That's brilliant. Okay. Well, listen, Valerie, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. And I think hopefully people listening or watching, or both, will have gained some insight into what you do, what a communications expert does, and the valuable advice and little chats that we've had about the age diversity issues in the workplace bring, and how potentially the positives can come out of that. So very grateful for you being on the podcast.
Thanks for reaching out to me, Mike. It's been nice to get to know you.
Well, no, and it's been my pleasure getting to know you, and hopefully we'll have another chat again at some time in the future. But in the meantime, very grateful for you for joining, and wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Yeah, goodbye. Bye.
If you are affected by age diversity issues at work, or are experiencing problems seeking employment and believe that your age is a barrier, or if you are an inclusive employer who actively embraces the older worker and are interested in the services and help we can offer, then please contact us at www.agediversitynetwork.com or simply follow us on LinkedIn.